This is Stereoactive Presents. I'm your host, Jeremiah Lee McVeigh, and this is the second installment of Useless Useful, in which I share about some things I'm particularly interested in or want to recommend at the moment, and I also tell you about a cause that I think is worthy of your attention and support. And remember, useless is used ironically, while useful is used more descriptively. Okay, so we'll start off with our quote unquote useless items. And again, we use that word ironically or in fun. These aren't actually necessarily useless things. It's just, a little more poppy or something like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story, which is a series on Netflix produced by Ryan Murphy about the Menendez brothers, who famously killed their parents in the late 80s, and the trial stretched into the mid 90s, or the drama around the trial and all of that. And I will say that I think the show itself is kind of a mixed bag. It's got some very powerful episodes and moments, and then a lot of mess too. It's a messy show. And the show has been criticized quite a bit, and I'm not going to necessarily dispute a lot of the key criticisms that I've seen of the show at this point. What was compelling to me to watch, I guess, was particular to my own life experience of just like remembering this happening when I was about 9 years old, I guess. And I think it was like around the time that I was first paying attention to what was happening in the world, because I would wake up early in the morning to go to school, and the news would be on in the house, and I would pay attention. And I feel like I knew what was happening in the world maybe a little sooner than a lot of people my age, just because I would watch the world news on ABC, whatever their show was called in the morning before Good Morning America. I would watch that as I was like eating my cereal and before I got ready for school in the morning. And I just remember the Menendez ordeal being such a big moment. And I guess like at the time as a child, I was sort of like, is this what the world is? It was very, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but like it felt like so disturbing. And also it just seemed like prelude in a way to a lot of what would come after it, of just sort of like these big splashy tabloid murder cases and other things, in that sort of like crossed over from being news items to being almost like pop culture in a way in the early to mid 90s. And the show very explicitly draws a line from the Menendez brothers to OJ in its later episodes of this series. And it even, I think very quickly, kind of draws a line between Jeffrey Dahmer, which happened around the same time, I don't remember exactly when, and their case. And just, there were so many other things in the culture then. Like I remember specifically the Central Park jogger case, and the stuff revolving around the what we now call the exonerated five, those kids who were, they were put in prison for something they didn't do. And obviously it's connected to our culture still, because that was one of those moments where Donald Trump called for the execution of those kids. And, look where that led us. This guy having this platform where he just spouts bigotry and hate. And not that that was the first time he'd done that, but it was a big moment, I think. And I don't know that I was aware of the Trump of it all at that time, but I remember hearing about the Central Park jogger on that same newscast. I mean, not the same exact one, but like when in those mornings when I would be watching the news early on in my awareness of what was happening in the world at large. And I don't know. I think that it was an interesting show to watch just because I had these memories, and it was sort of this revisiting of where I was in my life and kind of a realization of like this was the way I kind of entered into the larger world in a way. And isn't that weird? And it was such a weird time. Every time is weird unto itself in a way, I think. But the '90s, the way that, like I said, these true crime things and other sort of parallel happenings in the world crossed over into pop culture. It's kind of bizarre and weird that was the trajectory of things, and we still have a lot of the descendants of that today. Like what is the biggest sort of genre of so many things in media? I mean, including this show, like true crime. There's true crime podcasts. I mean, it's stuff that gets made fun of now for how prevalent it is and how everybody knows it and sees it and is just used to it. And it's just bizarre that we're so obsessed with misery. And I don't know, but I think that this particular case was so disturbing because of the familial aspect of like the accusations of abuse and a lot of the way that the brothers were covered, that, just people didn't take seriously the claims that they were making because people just didn't think of abuse in the same way then. And they didn't think of it particularly as something that could happen to boys, I guess. And I feel like we're in a different cultural moment, obviously, and a lot of that stuff is approached differently and talked about differently. But there was a moment in the late 80s and early 90s where things were changing. And I don't really have much of a point here, but I don't know. I guess I just recommend this show if you lived through the story happening in the culture back then. But again, it's kind of a messy show. I'm not going to fully endorse it, but I found it interesting to watch. So I'll leave it there. I feel like I've rambled about it enough. The other thing I want to talk about is a little cheerier, I hope. It's the folk singer Malvina Reynolds. And I've been just kind of listening to her lately, especially the last couple of days, because recently, like a couple weeks ago or so, her song came up on shuffle for me, Little Boxes, which I bet a lot of you know, especially from the series Weeds from, I think it was Showtime in the 2000s. It was the theme song for that show. And it goes, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. And I just hadn't ever really listened to the song much outside of it being in Weeds. And it came on in shuffle for me, and I was just sort of struck by the power of it. It's such a simple song and such a simple idea, but there's so much in it, and it got me sort of like going down a little bit of a rabbit hole with Malvina Reynolds' other music. And she's just an interesting character of a woman who came from a family of immigrants. She was the firstborn in this country. Her parents were from, I believe, Russia and Hungary. And she was a very learned woman in the middle part of the century. And she kind of went back to school as folk music hit just to get another degree because she already had a couple, at least, I think. And she learned music theory and stuff because she just saw folk music as this thing that she wanted to be a part of. And she wrote some really great folk songs, stuff that has been covered by Pete Seeger, including Little Boxes, and by a lot of other artists too throughout the years. And I just recommend going and checking out her stuff. It's all very simple yet powerful. She has this voice that it just sounds kind of, I don't know if it's raspy. You can hear an age in her voice, and it's unvarnished. She just has a great voice. There's a lot of character there. You could tell this is a woman who has lived a life already. And I think that comes from her coming to this career, this songwriting aspect of her life a little later than a lot of people do. And she had an experience. And it's interesting that her songs seem so sort of gentle almost and simple, yet they really have a deep well of connection to causes and to things that were very important, that were happening in the world at that time in the like late 50s, early 60s. So I definitely recommend checking out, of course, Little Boxes, listening to her recording of it, listening to other recordings of it by Pete Seeger and whoever else, but also just look up her other songs. So there you go. And now for the useful portion of the episode. And again, useful is a little more descriptive than the useless moniker. What I want to tell you about is a Kickstarter campaign called The Flytrap, Bringing Back the Feminist Blog. And the subtitle of it is Worker-Owned, Reader-Supported Intersectional Feminist Journalism to Unfuck Your Algorithm. And let me just kind of read you their description. What we're doing here. Do you miss the golden era of feminist blogging? So do we. That's why we, a smart, seasoned collective of writers, editors, and creatives, are launching The Flytrap, an independent, collectively owned media outfit that's bringing feminist thought and cultural criticism against the algorithm back to the internet and into your inbox starting November 5th, 2024. Yes, Election Day. We're reviving the experience of connecting with new and old feminist faves on a freewheeling website, starting with a weekly newsletter, and no, it's extremely not on Substack, where anything and everything comes under our lens. But we can't do it without you. So yes, this is a Kickstarter campaign, and the thing is, it's already funded. Their goal was, I believe, $45,000, and they're already, as I'm recording this, at over $47,000. So go look at what they're offering. You can get different packages of subscriptions and swag and access to various things that they'll be producing. But because, like I said, it's already funded, you know you're going to get it. Because, of course, with Kickstarter, most of the projects on there, if they don't hit their goal, the thing doesn't happen, you get your money back, et cetera, et cetera. But this one is funded. You know you're going to get what you are signing up for. So there's like a little pressure off of it if that's something that bothers you about this sort of thing, of just like the uncertainty. I don't know why it would, but maybe it does. And now they're kind of headed towards a stretch goal. And what is their stretch goal? Let's look at that real quick. I'm on their page. And I will link to this, of course, in the show notes for this episode. Okay, so actually, let's start with their description of how they'll use your money. So here's what they say. Our funding goal of $45,000 will help us get the Flytrap off the ground in style. Turns out sending out newsletters costs money. If we meet this goal, we'll be able to deliver one substantive issue a week along with special editions, fund our newsletter hosting and business operations, and pay founding collective members for their hard work to date and for developing, writing, editing, and illustrating the Flytrap. So yeah, this is an independent venture. I think it's so important these days to support these sorts of ventures, and because they have a level of, independence that you don't get from corporate media. They can kind of tell you like it is, as long as they have the resources to do that, because these things aren't free to do. if you're doing it at a certain scale, at least. And I can speak from experience that it's hard sometimes to meet deadlines and to hit your goals if you're working for free. So I think it's great, and I always support these sorts of ventures that are doing this and covering a space that needs to be covered. We could always use more women's voices, of course, in media and in the world. And I think it's great to endorse this sort of thing and give it your support. And again, the stretch goals, let's get to that. So their first stretch goal is for $55,000, which is $10,000 past what they were originally going for, and they're already $2,000 on their way to that. This will allow us, I'm quoting them now, to commission one freelance writer or artist per month, bringing even more cool people to your inbox with provocative, fun, cultural criticism and commentary, and keeping the Flytrap roster fun, surprising, and diverse. Publishing and paying freelancers fairly is in alignment with our values and long-term goals. Independent media should uplift and create opportunities for new voices, not run the same old week after week. And then they have another stretch goal, another $10,000, so $65,000. And with this, it means we'll be able to, again, quoting them, to send a second roundup style curated must-read edition every week and occasionally special editions. Plus, we'll be able to bring on additional guest writers and artists for even more cultural criticism. So basically, like with both these stretch goals, it's just them expanding the scope of what they do, which is great. So yeah, I think that this is a very worthy venture that deserves your attention and support if you are so inclined. And again, I will link to it in the show notes for this episode. And the way I knew about this, if you're at all interested, is from being present on Blue Sky, one of the many Twitter alternatives out there since Twitter became X and has been slowly run into the ground by Elon Musk. And I've ended up on Blue Sky and follow Andrea Grimes, who is one of the organizers of this. And I clicked over, looked at it, thought it seemed really cool, and pledged myself. So I'm not just telling you should do it. I put my money where my mouth is and gave a little myself. So yeah, I hope you'll check it out and that you enjoy it as well. And then the last part of our show is sort of the bulletin board for Stereoactive Media, where I tell you about what we've been up to lately. And what I can tell you about right now is another of our redacted AV releases. So I talked about that in the last installment of this. And if you follow Stereoactive Media on socials or anything, you've probably seen me posting about this and probably have seen what I'm about to tell you about. But Redacted AV, again, is the organized project through Stereoactive Media to resurface, reintroduce audio and video elements that were taken offline when an old company that I and a lot of other people in my circle used to work at, when it closed a few years ago. And I'm putting a lot of that stuff back out through Stereoactive Media under this Redacted AV label. And the second release of this, after the batch of Landlady performances from their session back in 2014, the second release is from a series that was called Here and There, featuring a band called Fight from Lafayette, Louisiana. And it's their performance of a song called Shellac. And I personally shot, edited, produced, directed this one back in 2012 when I went down to Festival International de Louisiana in Lafayette. And I captured video of the band playing this song in 3 different spaces. One at the rehearsal space as they were getting ready for a couple of shows at this festival. And then at a small venue in Lafayette called Blue Moon Saloon, where they played a great show. And then on a big festival stage a couple days later or a day later. I don't remember the exact dates off the top of my head right now. And so I took elements from all three of these performances and melded them together into one video, and it's all synced up to a recording of the song made at that rehearsal that Jay Burton, the leader of the band, recorded. And this was like a little differently done than a lot of stuff from that Here and There series from this old company, which Here and There was sort of like our go out into the world and get a performance from an artist on location somewhere instead of in a studio. And so usually it would be like 2-3 cameras shooting a band, maybe 1 or 2 takes, so we have extra stuff. But it would all be pretty much the same performance. This, of course, 3 different locations. So it was like a little different direction for that episode than other ones, which I found interesting to work on. And the band had a show last week in Lafayette, their first in years because they hadn't been active lately. So got that one resurfaced in the lead up to that show. And I hear the show went well, which is great. And like if you don't know Lafayette, a lot of people listening to this may, because I grew up there and talk about it to people a lot, I guess. But there's like a great little music scene there. Lafayette is the heart of Cajun country. There's a lot of like cultural events there, like this Festival International, which celebrates music and arts from the French-speaking world. And it takes place, it's a free festival every year in Lafayette. It's something that I went to as a kid growing up there and have gone back to as an adult, and it's just a great cultural kind of crown jewel, in my mind at least, to that city and to that region. And so I definitely endorse the festival. I endorse the band. I don't know if they're going to be playing any more shows, but check out their music. It's really fun stuff. Check out this video. And we should have more Redacted AV videos coming out soon. And, watch this space, of course, for other stuff from Stereoactive Media. So let's wrap it up there. Thank you for listening to Stereoactive Presents. The music in this episode is composed by Hansdale Sue and Maya McDonald. My name is Jeremiah Lee McVeigh. If you like what you hear in the show, please rate and review it in Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that allows that. Doing so helps us to expand our audience and is much appreciated. And please follow us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. Every little bit helps and is truly appreciated again. You can also get in touch with us at stereoactivemedia@gmail.com, and you can find more information about this show and everything else that Stereoactive Media is involved with at stereoactivemedia.com. Now, let's end the episode with that live performance of Shellac by the band Fights that I told you about earlier.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.